Movie 2 of Barbenheimer weekend for me was Barbie. And I would say I was pretty excited going into this one, not as much as Oppenheimer, but I still had high hopes for this movie. Everyone involved is very talented, and I had faith that this movie would turn out to be a fun time. And while I'd say it was overall enjoyable, I feel like this movie had a lot more issues than the early reviews let on. So I'm going to talk about those today and just kind of give my point of view on them.
Come on, Barbie, let's go party.
Hey, spoiler warning, by the way. I do talk about the plot and ending of this movie. Didn't say that when I was recording this, but there you go. First and foremost, I think the chemistry between Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling was stellar. Their dynamic throughout this movie, to me, was the most entertaining part of the movie, and it was super fun seeing them bounce off of one another. Margot Robbie kills it as Barbie, as we all assumed she would. As soon as they announced her as Barbie, I think everyone kind of nodded in agreement and said that that was probably the best choice they could have made. And she brings this childlike innocence to Barbie that I think was really needed with the way they took this story. As Barbie gains consciousness and kind of becomes her own person, while still having that childlike innocence of discovering the world for the first time. She has the charm, she has the emotion, she's funny when she needs to be, and she really just kills it in this role. And Ryan Gosling was probably my favorite part of this movie. Him as Ken was about as perfect as you could have imagined it being. He plays a brain-dead Giga Chad about as funny as you could, and every time he was on screen, I found it hilarious. And Barbie Land in this movie is showcased so beautifully. From the set design to the costume design, you really believe you're in a world just full of Barbie toys and that is fully lived in by Barbies. They don't cut any corners with it, and it's designed perfectly, I'd say. And they have a lot of fun with this idea that all the Barbies and Kens are kind of brainless and basically brainwashed into just being the toy counterpart of themselves. So you have Margot Robbie playing stereotypical Barbie, which I don't believe is an actual Barbie toy, but whatever. And then you have Ken being Beach Ken, so all he knows is beach. And they do that with most of the characters in this movie, and it's done really well. And they just have a lot of scenes of just a bunch of adults acting childish, and it's played really well. And I really respect the stylized nature of this film. I feel like most directors, if they got the Barbie licensing to a movie, they would have played it a lot more safe than Greta Gerwig does. And I really admire what she tried to do here. I don't really think it fully landed, and it resulted in a very frustrating movie for me. But I can at the very least appreciate the style that she took and the tone that she went with, because I feel like most other directors would have played it very safe, and I don't feel like she does that here. But this is a very frustrating movie for me. I have a lot of issues with it. I came out of the theater feeling pretty disappointed. And I think the majority of my issues lie within the plot itself, as well as kind of the tone that this movie tries to have. This movie tries to have this balance of like super satire where it's just hyper over the top humor, and then they'll just go to a scene where like Margot Robbie's contemplating her existence and her role in society and the fact that she's a failure to kids, and it's just kind of literally going scene by scene, changing the tone, and that was kind of appalling to me, to be honest. This movie was definitely marketed as just a wacky satire. It did promise that it would be going and having social commentary on the world through Barbies, and the direction they ended up taking was a bit odd to me, because they ultimately decided to go the super feminist and anti-patriarchy route, which probably wouldn't have been my first choice if I was making a movie about Barbies. But I still feel like the way they did it did lend reason to Barbie having this type of movie, and I feel like it could have worked. But I feel like this movie really struggles with staying focused on that topic. I feel like somebody behind the scenes just wanted to vent about their issues with society, so they just kind of forced the writers to sprinkle in these random scenes that don't really go anywhere, that just are just social commentary about society as a whole. They have too many plot lines running in this movie. They have one about Barbie questioning her existence. They have Ken learning about patriarchy. You have one about the relationships between kids and their toys. You have one about the relationships between moms and their daughters. And then you have one about the unrealistic standards set up by media in marketing. Like, there's so much going on in this movie, and the majority of it goes nowhere. And speaking of unfocused, there's a whole Will Ferrell thing in this movie where they have Will Ferrell playing like the CEO of Mattel, which in of itself is pretty weird that Mattel would allow this, because they're basically making fun of themselves for having a bunch of dudes making kids toys for girls. And to be honest, this did not have to be in the movie at all. I feel like Will Ferrell just heard about the Barbie movie, so he like texted somebody at the studio if he could be in it, and they were like, holy crap, Will Ferrell wants to be in our movie? All right, writers, throw him in and give him this amount of screen time and this amount of dialogue so we sell more tickets. And that's just what it felt like to me. He doesn't do anything in the movie outside of one scene that could have literally been anyone, and then that would have been the end of it. And while we're talking about the real life humans in this movie allegedly being a satire, kind of allows these characters to be exaggerated. And I think inherently the fact that there are Barbie and Ken dolls acting as their toy counterparts allows these characters to be super exaggerated, which works completely fine in Barbie Land. But then you get to the real world and the women act like regular women, but then all the men are literal douchebags. Like there's not a single good guy in this movie, minus Alan. Shout out Alan. But literally every single guy in this movie is played as a douche or an idiot or both, typically both. And I'd argue that the humans in the real world are even more stupid than the Ken dolls, which for me was a bit weird. Like Will Ferrell's crew in this movie are the dumbest people in this movie by far. Yet it's supposed to be the real world where people actually have brains. But this movie just kind of goes all over the place. They try and have so much to say that a lot of its effectiveness of what's being said is just kind of diminished because they don't set it up properly and build it, and it's just kind of set up and then immediate payoff because there's nothing in between. The only thing between the setup and the payoff is just time that we're not talking about it. It's not really important to the plot. And what is important to the plot in this movie, I'd say, is mostly the patriarchy and how bad it is. And I think this movie gets this wrong for the most part as well. Now, I'm not saying patriarchy is good by any means. I'm just saying the way the movie decided to handle it was just in poor taste, in my opinion. So at the start of this movie, you're in Barbie Land, and it's a land run by Barbies. It's a land where the government is just fully Barbie dolls and there's no Kens involved. But they play it up as like something to laugh at and laugh at all the Kens. But then you get to the real world and it's an actual patriarchy where men are mostly in position of power, and they explicitly just show scenes of women being brushed to the side. And then they obviously play that to be sad, which isn't a problem. It is a sad thing, but it is just like hypocritical. And it's only hypocritical because this movie doesn't recognize that the Barbies were doing that to the Kens, and they just play that for laughs the whole time. So once you're done seeing the movie, it just kind of seems in poor taste to me. And if this movie resolved that correctly, then I think it would have been fine. The way that it gets resolved, well, the way that this story goes, I'm just going to quickly summarize for context. I'm assuming most of you who are watching this have seen the movie. I'm obviously getting into spoilers. The Kens take over Barbie Land. They're in charge while Barbie's gone because Ken read a couple books about patriarchy and horses and how they just take over, and that is what they do. They're in charge of Barbie world, and it's just crap there. In summary, the Barbies take back the government and they're in charge of their land again. So like I was thinking going into this movie, I'm like, okay, well, Barbie's going to take back Barbie Land, of course. And then I would assume, I feel like most people would assume that they're going to allow some Kens in, and that the Barbies would integrate the Kens equally and create that world that the feminists in the real world actually fight for. But they don't go that route. And this movie had a great opportunity to be pretty empowering, I would say. And that's only about half of the issue. The other half of the issue comes to me, but the movie has a very Falcon and Winter Soldier type scene. And it's the ending of that show where Sam Wilson just gives a speech about everything wrong with the country. And in this case, it's everything wrong with expectations on women and just men in general. And there's a whole I don't even remember the character's name, but some character talks for what felt like forever, just complaining about all of their problems. And it's shown as this very heroic thing and very like brave thing of her to say. When a lot of these issues she's saying are like across both genders, it's not just a woman thing, but it's used as a plot point to like save Barbie Land, where literally the Barbie dolls just sneak and tell the other hypnotized Barbie dolls something crappy about men or something annoying that women have to do, and it snaps them out of their brainwashed state and makes them smart and just basically regular humans, when before they weren't even that. They were just characters of their toy. All they knew was what they were marketed as in the real world. So they're all of a sudden really smart, and like that's okay. Like I think this movie should have resolved with all of the dolls gaining consciousness and being their own humans. I think there was a much more compelling story there. But all the Barbie dolls get this consciousness, and then they try it with the Kens and they still play it for laughs. Like Barbie is trying to get Ken to understand this, and he's still just being a complete idiot. But ultimately he kind of acknowledges this and gains his own awareness, but he's still an idiot. And then the same goes with all the other Kens. They're still complete idiots, while the Barbies are just regular humans at this point. And like I said, with that combined with the whole patriarchy thing, where it goes from Barbie Land, all women, no dudes, to all dudes, no women. And then you would think the natural progression would be even amount of men and women. And then it stays with just all women. And it's all just in poor taste to me, combined together. And there was such a home run set up for them with everything they had, and they just chose the bitter way, I feel like. And there were so many directions they could have taken this movie. You could have very easily had a compelling story about the roles in society. Like that is set up at the start of this movie. You have stereotypical Barbie and you have Beach Ken. They all have their roles, and you could have had Barbie finding consciousness and kind of being self-aware and kind of starting to question her role in this world and starting to try and ask people around like, hey, do we want to do what we're supposed to do? Like, I don't know if I want to be stereotypical Barbie. And they could have had all the other Barbies who are still brainwashed kind of like talk her down and be like, no, you have to do this. And it could have been her and Ken journeying to the real world and seeing what's wrong with mankind still. It could have been mostly the same story, them seeing all the things that are wrong. And they find some people that kind of give them a new perception of life. The end of the story could have been them helping all the other Barbies and Ken see this. And it could have been a really powerful message at the end of the story. For example, you could have had Margot Robbie saying, I don't want to be the stereotypical Barbie, and she could have done something like, I don't want to be this cute little Barbie. I want to wear sweatpants and I want to have a job. I want to be successful. And you could have had that role, and I think that would have been a lot better to understand for most people, especially the kids. But like a simple story like that, where a Barbie with a role finds her purpose that is not her role and she breaks out and becomes who she truly wants to be, would have been a compelling story and fitting for Barbie. But at the end of the day, this movie kind of falls into what's now becoming a classic, quote, strong female lead type of movies, where they take the cheap route and just make every single guy in the film or show just complete douchebag. And it kind of just discounts the message they're trying to get across. I think at the core, there was a good message to this movie, but they once again take the cheap route, and it just feels in bad taste to me the way they approached it. That at its core was my issue with this movie. It felt like a missed opportunity, and it just felt like they could have done so much more with the ending than what they did. Having the Barbies integrate with the Kens after learning of the issues of the patriarchy would have been so much more powerful to me, rather than them just pushing Kens back down to their role. They just revert back to how they were instead of learning. And that's kind of my core issue with this movie. And I can already hear the counter arguments to what I'm saying here is that, oh, it's just a Barbie movie. Stop taking it so seriously. But like, to me, like, this movie is clearly trying to be more than just a Barbie movie. They didn't need the Barbie licensing to make this movie the way it was. And this movie really, I feel for the most part, wants to be a true commentary on society and the patriarchy. And it just uses the Barbie IP to kind of sell that to people. At the end of the day, this movie to me just feels like a edgy Walmart brand version of the Lego movie. I think the Lego movie does a lot of what this movie tries to do, but way better. And this movie had all the ingredients to be great, and that's what's so frustrating about it. It had all the ingredients, but it just feels like it was wasted. Now, it still has laughs, it still has good moments in the movie, and I don't hate the movie. I don't even dislike the movie. I just feel indifferent towards it. And as a newly established film critic, I feel like I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't talk about my opinion on this. Everyone's experience with movies are different, and for me, it just didn't work. And I think as a rating, I'm gonna give this movie a slightly messed up Chipotle order out of 10.
Oh man, they forgot the guac.
It's not an order or a movie that's messed up to the point that I can't watch it, but it's something that I'm still upset about and wish it was better. I felt like I didn't get what I was wanting out of this movie, while at the same time I can still watch it and accept it for what it was, but it just really feels like a missed opportunity for me. But there it is. That's my review. I don't know how long this video is. I've been talking for a long time, but if you enjoyed, leave a like. If you hate me, leave a like. Let me know how much you hate me down in the comments, how much you love me. Maybe you agree with me. Maybe someone agrees with me out there. And thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys all have a wonderful day, and peace out.